In all honesty, I find that horror films are seldom any good. Maybe that's just because trying to scare an audience doesn't really translate well into a compelling experience. Or maybe it's because the vast majority of horror films just rely on cheap jump scares to get that horror element across. Genuinely good horror films don't rely solely on scares to entertain, and thankfully, The Invisible Man fits into this bracket. It has a surprising amount of narrative heft to it, with themes dealing with the effects of abusive relationships, manipulation, and obsession. Elizabeth Moss did an incredible job as Cecilia, and the way the movie was directed was really effective. The camera moved towards empty spaces, and there was a blue tint that really brought it to life. The movie starts off very strong, but it does admittedly struggle a bit to maintain its momentum throughout the runtime due to some pretty rampant repetition. It didn't bother me too much, but it was pretty apparent, and it did bog the experience a little bit. There was also an action sequence towards the end that, although gripping and well crafted, felt really out of place with the rest of the film being such a slow burn. The film is at its best when Moss's character attempts to unveil the mystery and convince others and herself that she isn't crazy. I do wish that her character arc came out a bit more fully realized, even if that means sacrificing some subtlety, as it seems as if she did a substantial amount of growth before the film even began. I mean, I still like her arc and all, but I feel like it just could have been stronger and really given the movie that oomph that it really could have benefited from. The music wasn't particularly special, but there were some really strong moments, and overall it served the film well, even though it was probably underutilized. In terms of the horror aspect, I found it to be pretty tense at certain points, particularly during the second act, though it probably won't keep you awake at night. More likely it'll leave you thinking about themes of relationships. The way it deals with domestic abuse is actually pretty intriguing, and even where it fails to be thought-provoking, it's still very entertainment in a popcorn entertainment kind of way, making for a really good film overall. Even for its faults, I highly recommend it. If you don't get much out of the themes, the entertainment value persists, and vice versa, and I will give The Invisible Man a 7.5 out of 10. The next pandemic movie that I saw was Disney Pixar's new film, Onward. And Onward isn't a bad movie, but it absolutely pales in comparison to the other films in the Pixar library. In all fairness, it's not the worst movie from their catalog, because that award goes to Cars 2, hands down. But unlike that movie, which was a stinking heap of garbage, Onward is just honestly really bland. It's an incredibly standard, uninspired adventure flick. I actually don't even have that much to say about it. Most of the characters were stuck with stock personalities, which left them unrelatable at best and frustratingly annoying at worst. The Manticore Lady and the Pixies in particular were guilty of being incredibly irritating. I think the film's biggest issue was the bizarre decision to mix a fantasy world with a modern one and not do anything interesting or narratively substantial with it. If you ignore, one magical item in this entire film, the movie basically could have just been set in the real world. Obviously you'd have to kick out some of the unfunny visual gags, but other than that, it really doesn't do anything with its premise. The plot is a quest-oriented kind of thing, so the two main brother characters are kind of just going from one place to another and dealing with some stupid side plots along the way that are meant to build on their characters, but every time these little subplots happen, they outstay their welcome every single time. Sometimes throughout the movie, it would just cut to the mother character, and she proved to be worse than uninteresting. And unfortunately, the film was also just extremely predictable, and it was really easy to see where these plot threads were going. I called everything out in almost every instance as I was watching it. And I know I'm probably bashing on this movie more than it probably deserves, because, like, the film had a good, lighthearted tone, but, like, the actual jokes weren't very funny. The issues of the film just boil down to this: the world just isn't interesting. The characters just aren't interesting. The plot just is not interesting. And I mean, like, of course, like any Pixar outing, the animation is stunning, and the music and the atmosphere are joyous beyond belief. And I will say that it is well voice acted too, but the older brother felt wildly miscast, and I think Jack Black should have been chosen over Chris Pratt. And I mean, I like Chris Pratt, but this is a Jack Black role, and I don't know why they didn't choose him for it. Alright, in all fairness, there were 2 moments I actually really liked in this film that stuck out to me, which I'm going to spoil at the end after my rating for anyone who doesn't want this film to be spoiled for them. Alright, so the plot involves 2 brothers trying to see their dead dad for a day with magic, and they have a race against time or something. The ending battle isn't very exciting, and the ending itself was extremely predictable, but the moment leading up to all of that was actually pretty standout. I think Onward is the movie that I will forget really quickly, because at this point, I don't remember the name of a single character in the movie, and as of writing the script for this video, I saw that movie yesterday. So is it worth a watch? If I'm going to be honest, you'd probably be better off with just about any other Pixar film. I'd even argue Cars 2 might be a better watch, simply because it's so bad that it can genuinely be enjoyable, especially if you're drunk. I can't really call Onward bad. If anything, it's worse. It's bland. I think all in all, I think it deserves a 4 out of 10. Alright, now I'm just going to quickly round up the spoilers I was talking about earlier. So, the moment I was talking about that was leading up to the final battle is when the sad elf boy played by Tom Holland realizes that his brother took on the role of his father, after having thought of him as a deadbeat the entire movie. I actually think that moment was really beautifully done, and it single-handedly saved the film from being erased from my memory entirely after a few minutes after having watched it. And I think the other moment that stuck out to me is when the older brother drives his van into the rocks. I mean, it's nothing incredibly special, but I thought it was at least touching. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. Anyways, The Invisible Man, really good, highly recommend it. Onward, no, not so much. Alright, anyways, I'm off to do anything else. Okay, bye.